Cayenne. You bring out the sweats in me, and when I count to 1, 2, 3, I count you as a friend. Cayenne.
Greetings, fellow plant people. And thank you, first off, to Mason. Thank you, HerbRally, for the airwaves. Is it airways? All the ways. Thank you. Thank you, dear listener, for joining in. I'm Kyle Denton of Tippecanoe Herbs in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and of Root Radicle Herbal Academy worldwide. But also in Southeast Wisconsin for in-person classes, but worldwide for our online classes, of which I'm going to give you a little segment of one today for this episode of HerbRally. The class that I'm presenting is from it's a year-long series. It's called Herb of the Week, and we get week 1 today. That is entitled Cayenne, Aries, and Arise the American Frontier. So here's my little plan for the time that we're going to spend together. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Herb of the Week real quick. I'm going to get into some elemental energetics next after that, and some sky clock business, particular Aries, and the elemental energetics. We're going to talk about fire in particular. And the reason why I cover those first is because I'm paving a foundation that I want that as this series goes on, the listener, the student, will have a great foundation in order to build their own creative and critical thinking scaffolding from, so that they may be able to practice herbalism with a deeper understanding of the herbs and without an appeal to what the teachers or the book said, but from their own unique perspective based on their standing on the foundation. And so I think that's really important, to have a connection with the macrocosmic and the microcosmic. And so we're going to talk about things all the way down to the elemental sense and all the way back up again. This whole series, Herb of the Week, is going to be peppered generously, spicy, very spicy, cayenne spicy, with the second Hermetic principle, which is as above, so below, as within, so without. And then after Aries, we're going to talk about Samuel Thompson. We're going to talk about Thompsonian philosophy, the American frontier, the influence of Samuel Thompson on America. I think of Samuel Thompson as America's, like, the father of America's herbalism. I was going to say America's herb daddy, but I think father of American herbalism is probably a better legacy. And then we'll see all of this this is like, a show where you're like paving the way for the headliner. Come on, this is what I paid to see. Finally, the herb, cayenne. We're going to talk about cayenne, so spicy, so nicey, so melting the icy, so reasonably pricey. Don't get it in your eye see, or you might see what I see. Cayenne and its medicinal actions. Cayenne on the systems of the body, all up and down. Cayenne, waxing it on and off and on again. Poetic about my love for this beautiful plant. Yes, cayenne pepper. That'll be the first Herb of the Week. So Herb of the Week, what is it? Well, it is kind of what it sounds like. It's a year-long course, and every week we get a new lesson. And the first lesson is this one, cayenne. And it's you can join it any time of the year that you're listening. But I'm going to start on March 21st. And the reason why is because it's the astrological new year. It's the so-called equinox, the first day of Aries in the tropical astrological tradition. And so you're starting to see a picture here emerge. Fire, Aries is a fire sign, cayenne is a fiery herb. And that's kind of what I'm going for. Actually, I'm going to make a strong case showing the patterns so that you can understand these plants way deeper and have a elemental connection to the time of the year as well. I'll give you another example. Right now, as I'm recording, we're in the sign of Pisces, which is a water sign, and I'm on my own personal sea moss week. So my herb of the week right now is sea moss. It will be again in this course in about a year from now, if you're listening to it close to this air date. And if you're a real herb nerd, and I know you are, then you're probably saying, sea moss, wait, that's not an herb, that's not a plant. And you're right. And you know what? That's fine. I'm gonna still call it an herb of the week, and I'm gonna throw a couple mushrooms in there too, because herbalists use these things, and so that's my excuse, and I'll move on. These lessons are going to be audio lessons like you're listening to right now, where you could download them from our Teachable site, and you can play them at double speed if you want. Won't hurt my feelings, because I'm going to be talking about these plants for 60 minutes, sometimes maybe 40, but probably somewhere in the range of 60 to 80 minutes. We're going to get real deep and cover a lot of aspects of these plants as if we're doing an herb walk. We're going to talk about the systems of the body that they affect. We're going to talk about all the tissue states. You'll see lots and lots of, you'll be able to apply these elemental energetic principles from the ground up, from the cell up, from the microest to the most macro. We're going to pan out to the season. We're going to talk about medicine making. This is something that I do a lot of. This is my job as a medicine maker. I'm also a storyteller when it comes to teaching. So I'll be telling lots of stories too in these classes. You know what? I should start with a story. I feel like, I know you're probably like, we started a while ago, but let me just get back on track here. Get my own track with a story. It goes like this. Once upon a time, there was a young man. It's a story about me. There was a young man named Kyle Denton. That's me. And I was out one day kicking some rocks and wasting my time when all of a sudden I was captivated by the plant path, I like to call it. It was like a spiritual calling to me. It really opened up my eyes to the beauty of health and healing and the connection to the natural world. It changed my worldview. I wanted to be so immersed in this way of life. So, I was just obsessed with learning about plants one day. It just seemed. And so I go out and get some books, and I'm looking through these books, and I would talk about a plant in detail, and I would say, traditionally this plant has been used for this condition. And I would say, oh yeah, I have that condition. And then it's also used for this condition and this one and this one and this one. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have all of those too. I got to try this plant right now. I got to taste it. I got to get some. And then I would turn the page, and then there'd be another plant, and it would be like, this one's good for these conditions and these conditions. I'm like, I got all those too. I got to try that one too. And it was just like a whole book filled with that. Or I know somebody that has that. I got to try this. I want to see if I can convince my friends to try this one. And I remember like being super enthusiastic and going to an herb shop and, leaving with like a bag in each hand and each, filled with like 50 bags of 1 ounce herbs, and bringing them back home and looking at, putting them on the table and looking at all the different bags and seeing all the textures, seeing all the colors and the smells, and just being so enchanted. It was like, you ever got like a tarot deck for the first time and you're just like, oh, wow, cool. I want to learn everything about this card. And then you go to the next card, you're like, oh, I want to learn everything about this card. And then by the end of the night, you're like, how am I supposed to remember all these cards? So having all these herbs on my table, I'm like, where do I begin? Where do I start? And so I decided to start learning about herbalism through the Ayurvedic tradition and establishing a foundation so that I could build my thinking and my practice up from a foundational aspect, which I think is extremely important. And my herbal teacher, my first herbal teacher, my Ayurveda teacher, whose name was Amanda Lyon, she gave us some great advice at class. So the question or the thing that came up was basically what I was just talking about was like, how do you deal with this enthusiasm, this overwhelm, just wanting to know all these plants, everything about all these plants? Like, how do we begin? So interesting. And she said, here's a good way. Learn an herb a week. And after a year, you'll have 52 herbs. Now, in that week that you're learning the herb, you're not learning any other herbs. And this was a really great way to teach discipline and pacing. And so learn that herb. She was like, make a tea with it, make a tincture with it, put it in your palm and meditate with it, put it under your pillow and dream with it, get a piece of paper and a pencil and draw it. Go to your books, and instead of looking through your books, go to the index and look for that plant. Go out into the wild or to your garden, or just see if you can find this plant. And by the end of the week, you will have fully immersed yourself in this plant. And it's building a relationship in that way. You're no longer committing things to memory. You have memories of this plant. You know through your experiences. And so fast forward to today. Like I said, I got a bunch of irons in the fire. I have an herb shop that I own. We make our own medicine to stock the entire shop. I consult very frequently. I am making custom formulas multiple times a day for my clients, for other people's clients. I am surrounded by 200 plus herbs all the time. It's awesome. Bulk herbs, single simple tinctures, single herbal extracts of vinegar, of oil, of essential oils, all this stuff, you name it. It's like at my disposal, tons and tons of plants. But really, when it comes down to my practice, I'm probably only using 25 plants at a time, maybe. And now, if I have 52 plants that I know inside and out, backwards, forwards, like, close friends, like herbal allies, then I'll have a very nuanced and intricate dispensatory. So I want to share all of that with you it's $1 a week, $1. That's less than a heaping teaspoon of cardamom. That's less than a takeaway chamomile cup of tea at a gas station. To the people who know which gas stations sell chamomile tea in the tea bags, and also know which gas stations don't sell it. Now, this is my plant people that I'm talking to. These are the people I like. So, and I'm talking, styrofoam cup, hot water, old crusty chamomile tea bag. You're on a road trip. It's less than that, okay? So here we go. I'm going to jump into the lesson now. And before I do, I am working on it's a work in progress. So it's a jingle. So a little introductory jingle to Herb of the Week. Here it is.
It's the herb of the week. It's the herb of the week. It's the herb of the week.
So this is a plant course. Of course, it's a study of plants, but I'm saying this as a preemptive reminder because you might be wondering 20 minutes from now, where are we going to talk about plants? And really my intention is to offer a really deeper understanding and relationship with the plants that we can find by training our senses to the recognition of greater patterns. Okay, so I'm gonna pave these patterns down. I'm gonna lay them down. And that's one of the things that I love so much about herbcraft in general is the recognition of patterns. here's my worldview bias coming out now. Okay, I think that patterns show harmony and order. I think that they allude to the unifying forces in the universe, and they point to a designer. Are you familiar with the term negentropy? It's the opposite of entropy. So I'm sure there's a better word than negentropy, like posentropy or something. But when I was young in public school, I learned that the world is always falling apart and it's dark and it's going to fall apart forever until eternity, until it's all completely fallen apart forever. And everything is just getting more and more disorganized by the moment. And then I started, and I was like, oh, really? Oh, okay. Is that so? And then I started studying herbalism, and I was like, no, that's not so. That's absolutely not so. I know this from the way that I work with plants, the way that I work with healing, the way that I work with people. I see patterns. I see unifying forces. You know what? I'm going to give you an example. If you go and get a bunch of metronomes and you put them into a room and you put them all in different places in the room, on the shelf, on the floor, on the couch, on the fireplace mantle, and you just knock them all at different times, and now they're going click, 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 click. They're all just going different speeds and different ways. And then go take a break, have yourself some chamomile, some tulsi and lemon balm tea, come back to the room a little bit later, and guess what you'll see? All of them in harmony. And that's a great example, and there's many, of this desire of things to unify in harmony with each other, this negentropy. And so I really want to reinforce these patterns as we move through this course here, so that we could see a bigger picture. From the word pattern, by the way, we get paternal, we get names like Peter, the rock, and pater, like other names like Iupater. Citizens of ancient Rome would know Iupater now as Jupiter, pater, pitter patter of the heart. People, speaking of the heart, can recite by heart a prayer called Pater Noster, which is the Our Father. I'm not going to do it. Who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. I can't help it. I can't help it. It's in there. It's a pattern. It's got to come out. Okay, where was I? I think that the word pattern itself is a word that can be used to describe the masculine principle in a single word. And so much so that, okay, here's a scene. You have like a detective or like a conspiracy theorist or something, and he's got like a room with a bunch of like pictures and clippings of newspaper, and then there's there's like the yarn taped to the wall, and there's all this like spider web, and there's like a post-it note that says like, what's the pattern? And I think that that's just another way of asking like, what is the paternal, what is the fatherly principle? What's the daddy here? Who is the daddy? Wherefore art thy daddy? It's like that would be like a segment of like if Maury Povich was in like the court of King James and they like ask John Dee for like the crystal ball instead of the lie detector test or something. Anyway, where was I? Patterns. Okay, back to patterns. Eyes to see, ears to hear. We can recognize, fractal patterns from little microcosmic expressions. I keep saying that, but in a person, let's just say their symptoms, for example, and match them up to expressions that we find in nature, like energetics. Like we could scale that up, all the way up to the sky, macrocosmic patterns, to the angels or the angles of the sun. in the time of the year, the angle of the sun to the stars. They're unique scenes that they put across the sky and have influence on us when what they're creating when they're over our heads. So for the sign, the first day of Aries, the sign of Aries in the zodiac, we have the element of fire. So fire, earth, air, water. We're going to cover all of those in depth, but let's talk about fire first. Fire as an element, it is the initiating force. It is why that fire is the first sign. It's the beginning of the year. In fact, Aries is the cardinal fire sign. So we could take all of the four elements and divide them up into further categories, saying one is the beginning, one is the most fixed form of that, and one is the most changeable form of that. So in the beginning, there's of the fire signs, you could think of like a match, striking a match. There's the smell of sulfur. It's hot. It's really, really hot and sparky. And moving on into a different form of fire, there's the hearth, which you want to gather around, you want to look at, you want to make yourself comfortable by. And then there's the changing fire, the mutable signs of fire, which is the fire is all burnt out and now it needs to find fuel, and so it moves on to a different place. You could say that's a wildfire, but it's just moving on to a different form. And fire itself is a creative force. It's a masculine force. It's action, energy, power. It is invigorating, all right? I want you to know that this is going to be very pertaining to our herbal lesson. I'm just going to remind. It heats and it burns. It sounds like Cayenne. Sounds like I'm hinting at Cayenne here, but I'm talking about fire as an element. It's transforming. It's associated with the digestive process, with learning. It leads, it explores. It's courageous. It brings light. It asserts. Are you familiar with Walter Russell? He calls carbon frozen fire. I always thought that was pretty cool. Fire in the mental, emotional, and spiritual qualities. I would say it's centered about self. There's a self-centered aspect to it. It's passionate. Think about the flames of passion. That's a word that people use, right? A phrase. It's visionary. You can see in the fire. You could see because of fire, because of the light emanating. It commands attention because it's dangerous. It's witty. It's sharp. It's competitive. It loves a challenge and a challenger in the case of Aries. The word divine spark, I guess, the phrase divine spark, I messed that up again, but that's a fire term. Fire in the body, like physical characteristics of fire. I would say athletes, athletic, there's a sharpness to it. There's a cutting aspect. Fire sign in like the eyes would have like a very strong, fiery, intent gaze, sharp cutting gaze. There's a lot of energy. There's a lot of movement. The voice is loud and commanding. They go through fuel in the digestion. So if it's moving down to the digestion, I'm thinking about like the fiery constitution burns up fuel. It's transforming things. In health, in like balance fire, it's adaptable, it's high energy, it's athletic, it's very focused. In sickness or like ill expressions of fire, we have like very, very hot acute fevers. We have things that express as redness, like acne, boils, ruddy face, itching, the sting of the nettle, which is the herb of the week for week 2, by the way. We got sharp pains. You're more prone to accidents and injury, inflammation, things like that. There's even fire in the emojis. There's the fire emoji. There's the face, the red face that's like wants to swear, but it's all... It's like swearing. There's the clap one, especially like if you clap in between everything you say, because listen to this person. I would say that's a fiery emoji. I think that the salsa dancing lady is a fiery emoji. Okay, now that's fire. Aries is a fire sign. So Aries is the ram. And if you look at the star constellations, if you look up at the sky, it's really fun. You can see Aries. It's kind of wedged between Pisces, and there's the Pleiades, if you know where that is. That's up there too. That's around Taurus. So Aries is up there. And when we're in the season of Aries, it's basically like the sun is blocking out that part of the sky. So the sun is like following that particular constellation. So you're not going to be able to see it in the sign of Aries. In fact, you probably won't be able to see it until the other side of the year across the zodiac, which is Libra from Aries. But anyway, it's the ram. It's the seed. It's the sign that rules the cerebrum and cerebellum. So those words are both also related to seed, as in cereal. Cerebrum, cerebellum. This is the seed of biology as well, of our divine spark. Aries in our biology rules the top of the head, and that's how you can tell. That's how I can tell, like physiognomically. Some people who have a lot of strong Aries placements they lead really well with their head, and they might have a strong looking forehead. They're up there. There's a lot of this archetypical ram aspect where you're butting heads with your bros, there's an expression where the head goes, the feet follow. So you might think that the Aries is the leader, but it's not. It's the it's the first. Some Aries make really good leaders because they're the initiatory, but they're also really quick, maybe too quick. So they're not always the best leaders, but they're the first. They're the first ones out there. Maybe the berserker if you're on like a battlefield. So there's the first day of spring, but that starts with Aries in the nature-based traditions, I guess. It's the beginning of the year, so it's the new year. Happy New Year! Did you know it's New Year's? It is in a lot of traditions. So that just basically means the zodiac wheel has completely turned, and now we start again. So if you want to picture that in your mind, just draw a circle, in your imagination, put it straight in front of you, and then bisect it from top to bottom. And those are going to be the high and low points of the sun. That's the solstices. And then bisect that perpendicular from left to right. And those are going to be the equinoxes, or the equal points of light in the year. And if you're looking at it like it's a clock face, 9 o'clock would be Aries. And then it moves like counterclockwise, in the way that I see it in my mind, at least, in the way that we see it in the sky too. So let's see here. Aries, like I said, it's the match. It's the first sign. Where am I? What am I thinking about? Oh, you know what else it rules? It rules the maxillary arch. So anywhere between the maxillary arch, or the upper teeth, and up, that's your Aries zone. Here's an Aries axiom: safety fourth. Because Aries wants to be first. It really does. It wants to be first so bad. So it's first, and hurry up, we're going to be late, second. And do you have a problem with that? Third. And safety, fourth. Here's another Aries axiom: I am. And just a little quote from Exodus 3:14. God said to Moses, I am who I am. That is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent you to me. So there's this idea of the Aries being associated with identity, and the herbs of Aries having a lot to do with knowing thyself, truly knowing thyself. It's ruled by Mars, and Mars is, in my cosmology, Mars is a name that we give to this light that's in the sky that has a vibrational influence upon this physical plane. And we categorize that influence into an archetype, and that archetype we call Mars, and we describe it as, the influence of the masculine principle of initiation, of action, and even things like up to including war. So think about how Mars has been portrayed in the movies throughout history, all these things, and you'll get an idea. And think about a general on the battlefield, the winning general, not just any general on the battlefield, the winning general. Okay, and so there's your archetype of the ruling luminary of the sign. And then the sign itself is like the setting. So the sign is like the battlefield. So you could think about settings like pond, courtroom, garden, hayfield. Those are the settings that we can say that the ruling archetype falls into, or some other ones just fall in their detriment in. But Aries is ruled by Mars. Aries is also the expressed as the Emperor card in the tarot, and that's number 4. So with number 4 in the major arcana, you get the square, and the square, or the angles of sorrow. You have 4 90-degree angles to make a square. 4 points, number 4, and you have this. How can I say it? You have structure when it comes to, say, four sides, but you also have conflict, because that's what the angles of sorrow create. So we use in astrology, when you talk about squares, you're talking about points of conflict, and that's also the same thing when you're talking about it in a geometrical form too. It doesn't allow energy to flow. It has a conflicting energy in a 90-degree angle. And the 2 of Wands fits really nicely for the minor arcana for our lesson today. That's the Cayenne card to me. The 2, 3, and 4 of each suit is in the minor arcana is the cardinal of each element, the cardinal sign, just for future reference. So for Cayenne, the initiation, we have, if you look at the Rider-Waite deck, it's depicted as, here's a man that's looks like a cayenne pepper. He's wearing a stained cayenne robe. He's just cayenne from head to toe. Super red. He's got a red cap. He's got a red robe. He's got a red undergarment. He's holding a looking glass and maybe plotting his course as he is courageously about to leap over a wall with one of the staffs, with one of the wands in his hands, leaving the other one behind as a point of reference. And so, there's a little syncretism to add on to the pile and make it a little bit more spicy. And for the theme song of Aries, I think about I Get Knocked Down by Chumbawamba. Because if you ever see rams butting heads, they just get knocked down, but they get up again. They're never going to keep me down. Okay, moving on. We're going to cover Aries in a lot of detail as we go through our series here. We're going to talk about stinging nettles next, because nettles are very Aryan in my mind. They're like Martian plants because they have little weapons on them. And we're going to talk about ginger as a plant of Aries, and then as we're moving through Aries and into Taurus, I'll talk about some more rooty stuff too. You can find that information on our Teachable page. Okay. Samuel Thompson, the people's doctor. I'm getting a lot of the information about Samuel Thompson from some of his own memoirs. There's another book entitled The People's Doctor. There's a great book by Matthew Wood called The Magical Staff. If you're a Matthew Wood fan and you don't have that book, it's a great one. It covers a lot of the influential medicine doctors throughout the ages and the shaping of the Western tradition of herbalism and medicine, natural medicine. Anyway, Samuel Thompson was born on February 9th, 1769, and that's a day after my birthday. I was born in the 20th century, but I just keep seeing a lot of reasons to like Samuel Thompson, and I feel a kinship with him. I feel connected to him through his philosophy, through his tribulations in a way. I feel inspired by his desire to go in the face of the status quo and heal people with herbal medicine primarily. And I really respect that his great influence that he had without titles. So, and the thing that I love about Samuel Thompson most of all is that he was a true vitalist. A true vitalist. And I'm not talking about like the new vitalist that claims to be a vitalist, but they abandon their positions out of like the slightest fear while advocating desperately for mass consumption and government mandating of pharmaceutical poison that actually retards vitality. I mean, he was a true vitalist, and he stood against that stuff in his day. That's exactly what he was fighting against. That's what gave him the reputation and the quote unquote hellish animosity that he faced. There's nothing new under the sun. Back then, the big pharma of the day was practicing with quote unquote science, settled science. That was there's my bias coming out. Pardon me. But people were the way that doctors would practice were through mercuriation, which is poisoning through mercury, and arsenic and bloodletting, and just barbaric, horrible practices. And he had the radical notion that the body could heal itself and could be assisted to do so with plants instead of, industrial waste products. And so Samuel Thompson was a root doctor that grew up, in the wilderness of New England. And he studied, apprenticed under other root doctors and, wise women of the area, and gained quite the reputation, although he was quote unquote uneducated. And in my deciphering of black magic terms, I've realized that the word uneducated, when referring to people and historically, is usually just a saying that they weren't initiated by the priest class of academia and initiated into their cult or whatever. So he was quite educated. In fact, if you read his memoirs, you'll feel you might be lacking in the English language and the way that he has command over it, and also his education through healing. He was a root doctor. He's not a book doctor. He was a root doctor. And so he gained a lot of popularity out of a series of little plagues, I guess, that came through villages in the area, and people who were under the care of these book doctors, their patients died, and under the care of Samuel Thompson, none of them died. So more and more people, he became kind of the people's champion in that way, and a lot like Paracelsus, where his contemporaries and his peers would run him out of town or excommunicate him from their group professionally, while the people that he helped were much, much happier. And that's exactly what he was doing it for. He was doing it for healing people. So he had a let me see here. I have a couple of bullet points here that I put down from Matt Wood's book. The bullet point says hot cold. This was the Samuel Thompson's philosophy in practice. I'll just briefly go through this. Hot cold. So what do I mean by that? There's a quote here from the book. Heat is the vehicle of life. Cold, or lessening power of heat, is the cause of all disease. So Samuel Thompson saw that it's just broke it down just like that, yin yang. One thing is alive, and when it's in order for it to move and to continue to create and sustain life, there's got to be some heat. And when a cold comes in, or when that heat starts to diminish and it makes it more hospitable for a cold to come into the environment, that's when disease and eventually death arise. Pretty easy. I like that. We could say, he also says that the stomach is the center of radiation of heat. So I like that a lot because it makes perfect sense to me. Back in his day, there was like the indigenous people, like his time, indigenous people around that lived around him, indigenous people that lived in Europe, indigenous people that lived anywhere where it's cold in the world, okay? They have a practice of building houses that are circular in shape, whether they're domes or something, and they have the hearth in the middle. And the hearth is where, you have your fire, you're cooking your food, you're chit-chatting, you're lounging, and from that fire, it radiates outwards throughout the structure. And if it's a circular or dome-like structure, then that heat can move unimpeded. If there's angles of sorrow, then that traps the energy and it doesn't move back. But here's the kind of the point, is that once it radiates outwards to the periphery of the circle, it will change its temperature differential dynamic and move back in again. So it circulates this movement of energy. And that's what I see happening in the body as well. There's the stomach as the center of radiation of heat. You could say orgone energy, you could say prana, you could say life force, you could say chi, call it whatever you want. I like heat though, because it's very basic. It's something that we all know. And we also know that in order to be alive, you got to be a hot body. And it's moving it outwards. And then the key is that movement, diffusing that movement backwards once it reaches the periphery, so that there's a flow, so that it comes back. And diffusing heat from the core to the periphery is really, really important. Now, there's a word that he used here that was the substrate of disease, or cold would come in and it would settle, and it would create a physical form that was called, back in the old days, canker. And you think like canker sore, but I think canker sounds and looks a lot like if you took that K out and you put a C there. And what that basically is a physical obstruction. Physical obstruction, whether it's manifested from emotional into physical, or spiritual into mental into physical, or of course it's in my view, it's always coming from the subtle begets the gross. But anyway, it's there, it's physically there, and now it's physically obstructing the movement of the heat, or of that prana, or that orgone energy outwards. So what is the next step is fever. And according to Thompson, fever is the archetypical disease. It represented here's a quote from Matthew Wood. It represented the natural attempt by the life force to reassert control over the organism by expelling cold, blockages, and impurities. So the fever is the organism's attempt to reestablish control, the dominance of the movement of heat, and the expelling of cold that may have settled in the center or is obstructing the movement of the heat outwards to the periphery. So, did you hear that Tylenol represent it? laxatives. Did you hear that? Antipyretic drug manufacturers? I hope so, because according to Thompson, and I happen to agree, that fever is the archetypical disease. And it's really important. It's really, really important. Here's another quote that I put down here. After finding a general principle respecting fevers and reducing that to practice, I found it sure in all disease. That's Thompson, by the way. Oh, how dare you? You don't have all the diseases that we have now, the modern diseases. Well, he said sure in all disease. He didn't say maybe there's going to be a disease one day. He had a very thorough understanding of the vitality of the body, and he reduced it down to a very simple form and was able to convey that in simple terms to, I guess, simple folk. And when he says sure in all disease, I happen to agree. So that's obviously controversial. It was controversial then. It's controversial now for me to say something like that, right? How dare you? I could hear it. I could hear the vibrations. It's okay. But the fun thing though, how Samuel Thompson wins, is that in his lifetime, 20% of the United States population adopted his framework of healing. Now just put that in perspective for a second. At a time in the late early 1800s, when messages were delivered by horse and buggy and people were isolated into smaller groups, one man in his lifetime was able to show the importance of this philosophy to, 1/5 of the population. And they were disciples, if you will. They were Thompsonians. So what is that philosophy in review? It is warming the core with something with an herb that is diffusive, that is dispelling of mucus and obstructions, so that the heat may radiate all the way out to the periphery and return back to the core. That's the key, returning. And at the time, when he first began, he started using lobelia, and I'm going to touch on lobelia throughout our course. But as he moved on, and as demand changed as well, they changed some of the herbs around. He was using ginger. We're going to cover that in the Aries segment. He was using prickly ash. I'll touch on that in Aquarius. He was using, I don't know if he was using echinacea. I don't think he was, but he was using bayberry. But I think echinacea would be a good Thompsonian candidate for archetypical Thompsonian diffuser. And I'm going to cover that in Pisces for that reason, because it has more of an effect on the waters and the structuring of the waters as well. But he also used cayenne pepper. And so that's where cayenne pepper helps make a mark on the expansion of the colonies, the expansion westward, the mark of American herbalism, thanks to our herb daddy, America's herb daddy. And God bless Samuel Thompson. God bless America. Okay, let's get into cayenne pepper. Holy moly, it's about time. It's the spicy bits now. Let's talk about something spicy and nicey. You know what? I'm drinking some cayenne water right now. Since this podcast is brought to you by Cayenne, I'm going to take a little sip here and see if it has any effect on my voice. Whoa, it's so much sharper. Wow. Yes, it's a stimulating aromatic. Very stimulating. Okay, here's what's happening. My forehead's getting a little bit of sweat, and I'm feeling that heat at the back of my throat. My lips and my tongue are hot, and it's now it's moving down my throat a little bit, and I can feel it warming up my esophagus, and now it's sitting in my stomach. Ooh, so nice. I could feel that warmth in my core right now. Yep, there it goes. It's radiating out. It's radiating out. Perfect. Okay. So cayenne pepper, I'm encouraging you. I'm fostering the courage in you. And this is an Aries quality, courage, going ahead, doing what other people haven't done yet. Cayenne is a member of the Solanaceae family, which is the nightshades. Are you familiar with the Scoville scale? Did I say that right? Scoville scale? That's the scale of hotness. And cayenne pepper is somewhere in the department of, you could find it in commerce from like 35,000 up to, I think I've seen it at like over 100,000, but I know that it gets like to 160. And just for reference, like weapon grade pepper spray is 500,000. So that's way, way, way hotter than cayenne pepper, weapon grade. And I think the hottest thing on the Scoville scale of peppers is the Carolina Reaper, which I was just looking at the other day, and I think it was like 1,600,000 or something. So really, really hot, and torturous probably. Here's something that I thought was really interesting. The name cayenne, the botanical name is Capsicum annuum. Capsicum annuum. That's CAPSICUM ANNUUM. It's kind of fun to like write that out, because two N's next to two U's, it's like upside down waves. And then there's an M, which is like both. Again, it's just fun. It's fun. It's a pleasure to write. But here's the fun thing. And this is just very satisfactory when I pick these things out. They fit so well. All right. So cap means the head. In Italian, how you would say the new year is Capodanno. Capodanno. That means the capo is also the boss. So the capo di familia. The Capodanno is the head of the year. So we got cap in capsicum and ANNUUM, as in the head of the year. Oh, it's so satisfying. I put cayenne there in the first degrees of Aries, and it just made so much sense to me. And then when I found that out, I was like, yes, little cherry on top. That's perfect synchronicity. I love that. You might have to write it out to get what I'm talking about, but it's there. The head of the year, because annuum means year. And I don't really know what capsicum means, but in there we have the word for head in there. Okay, cool. Let's see here. Where am I? Let me look at my notes here. Kind of a freestyling presenter, by the way, if you haven't caught on by now. All right. I have a couple of bullet points here. The medicinal virtues of cayenne. So, number 1, it's a blood equalizer. You know what? Number 0.5. Let me just tell you something. Before I talk about the medicinal virtues of cayenne, I want to just share some people who I have a tremendous amount of respect for that love cayenne more than me. Okay, so we already talked about the late Samuel Thompson, but I'll also include the late Dr. Christopher, and you could definitely find his work, in many places. His legacy still lives on. He is a very famous herbalist from the 20th century in America and helped keep the tradition of herbalism alive, though he was a cardiologist and treated people with heart attacks for 30 years. And going back to my first point of the bullet points, I'll get back to that in a second here. But Dr. Christopher, very, very influential also to me as well. He was a Thompsonian. I'm a Thompsonian. I like that's what I like to do. I'm a vitalist. I like to equalize the blood. I like to treat the vitality in people on the very basic levels. Jethro Kloss, who is the author of Back to Eden, and he wrote, there's a lot of books in that, or a lot of herbs in that book, but he really, really loved cayenne. Barbara O'Neill, who's alive, and she is a friend of a friend. So she is a naturopath from like New Zealand or Australia. I don't know, one of those places. She calls where she always complains about the wallabies in her garden. So wherever wallabies are, that's where she is. It's funny. She calls it cane pepper. Cane pepper. It's like CANE. And if you read if you watch a video with her and it's got captions, it always says cane pepper. And so it makes me wonder if like somebody will ever come into the herb shop and they'll be like, "Do you have any cane pepper?" I'll know exactly what they're talking about. So Barbara O'Neill, big lover of cayenne. Same with me. Okay, back to my medicinal virtues of cayenne. It's a blood equalizer, so it can stop a heart attack. Can I make that claim? Well, I've never used. It's been purported to stop many a heart attack. I've never used cayenne to stop a heart attack, or maybe I have. I don't know, but not that I know of. And stroke. And so this information that I have comes from, many people, including Barbara O'Neill, who has done that before, but certainly Dr. Christopher, who was a cardiologist, and 30 years of practice, he said, of the hundreds of people that were having a heart attack that I was able to administer cayenne pepper to were able to survive, all of them. So I kind of butchered whatever the quote was, but you get the point. He never lost a patient to a heart attack or a stroke when he was able to administer cayenne pepper to the person when they were having that affliction. So way to go, Dr. Christopher. You're awesome. Thank you for being in practice in the the medical industrial complex and bringing your beautiful herbal knowledge into that practice. Dr. Christopher has lots of, you could find his products that he made, and you can still find them. You can even buy them on Amazon. One of his products is a really popular one, is Dr. Christopher's eye solution. And guess what the main ingredient of Dr. Christopher's eye drops are? Guess. It's cayenne. I know what you're thinking, like, oh, I love cayenne. I can put it on my, owies and stuff like that, but I better not get it in my eyes. But Dr. Christopher's like, put this in your eyes. It's good for your eyes. It is good for your eyes. It's great for your eyes. It helps brighten up your eyes. I think that's what his formula is called, like eye brightener. So yeah, it burns, but it's the idea is that it's bringing blood to these areas. So how does it help with a heart attack? Let's talk about that. How does it help with a stroke? Well, what cayenne is doing is it is working. It works by equalizing the blood. So if you can picture like Hoover Dam in your mind, and it's got like a little hole. No, wait, I heard a better example. If you have a water balloon and you poke a hole in the water balloon and there's just like water pouring out, pouring out. I don't know where I'm going with this example, but somehow by taking cayenne, it changes the intensity of the amount of pressure coming out of the fluid pouring out. So I'm just going to put this back into terms that I've worked with. It stops bleeding. So actually this happened a few days ago. I have a wound on my finger, and as you could tell, I could play the guitar again. I cut my finger because I was reaching into a box to pull out a bunch of 2-ounce glass bottles, and one of them was broken and sliced my 2-3 spots on my hand, and it was bleeding quite a bit. And I'm at my shop, and I told my helpers, I was like, this is funny because I was like, quick, you guys, I'm bleeding. I'm bleeding a lot. Go get some cayenne and the camera and start filming. We're gonna make a commercial for my class. And they're like, what? And I'm like dripping blood all over the floor. They're like, what? like, Cayenne in the camera, we're going to film. And I was just so excited that I had cut myself as I was thinking about cayenne so much. So what it does is it equalizes the pressure so that it's not coming out. So um, if you have the pressure coming out only in one spot and you have cayenne that equalizes the blood all throughout your body, it's no longer putting the pressure on that one spot and it cleans it up. And so the same thing happens in a heart attack or a stroke where the heart becomes congested because it's injured and it becomes congested with blood. And by taking cayenne pepper and having this very, very, very stimulating aromatic quality that it decongest the blood and it stimulates the blood to move everywhere and not just pool up in one place. And in the case of trauma or first aid, safety fourth, Aries, it's pooling up all, or it's just pouring out in one place, and instead it's equalized. So now it opens up all the little channels. So going back to my example that I had in my mind of if there's a hole in Hoover Dam and all of this water from Lake Mead is just like pouring out and it looks like it's going to bust open the dam. What cayenne would do would open up, thousands of ancillary channels all around Lake Mead so that it could equalize the pressure of the leak. Does that make sense? So that's why it's amazing for heart attacks, it's amazing for strokes, and it's an amazing thing to have in your first aid kit. I don't go into the wilderness without cayenne powder. Like I have stopped bleeding. I've whacked myself really good with an axe, trying to get some chaga before. I've cut myself out like way far out in the brush, and I have. I was looking at my phone, and another synchronicity popped up, and I was like, 3 years ago today, and I totally forgot about this, but I had cut myself again with cayenne. And I was like looking at the part of my hand where it was, and I was like, wow, there's no scar there at all. It heals it up very, very quickly. So it's also antimicrobial. Thank you for that. Not only being stopping the blood and equalizing it, but also having an antimicrobial action. There was another time that I saved myself from stitches. I have a couple of cayenne non-stitches scars on my hands. One's on my thumb. And I was learning this trick where you can like slice into an avocado, like you cut the avocado in half and then you got the seed, and in order to get it out you just like whomp with a knife and you put it into the seed and then you twist it and then you pull it out and then so I had really dull knives and so I'm holding it in my hand and I just went whomp and it just like slipped off of the seed and just went whomp right into my hand. And here's the worst part. I had made like a steak and veggies and my meal was like all ready to be eaten, and the last thing that I was putting on top of my plate was the avocado, and I freaking bled all over it and ruined it. That's what I was most upset about actually. But that was a really good wound, and I stopped it lickety split with cayenne, and in fact it probably takes about 30 seconds or so for it to stop bleeding. And I mean, like, this was like stitches bad, and it's stitches good. No stitches, actually. So it's a great first aid. Keep some cayenne powder in a first aid kit. Know where it is. Write cayenne on it. Write stops bleeding so other people know. Write for heart attack so other people know. A dose for something like that, how I would recommend using it is the other day when I cut my hand, I'm like, woohoo, I cut my hand. I'm bleeding everywhere. Quick, we can make a commercial. I just got like a teaspoon of cayenne and I poured it on my fingers that were bleeding. So I'm just like covering it. And then from that teaspoon, I like licked it so that I'm getting like maybe a quarter of a teaspoon in my mouth. And within, I don't know, 15, 30 seconds, the bleeding had stopped. So that was awesome. And when you're in a situation like that, a little bit of cayenne pepper in your mouth isn't going to hurt. In fact, as I was mentioning earlier, I have less than a cup of water right here in my hand with a quarter teaspoon of cayenne. So, and I'm kind of a wimp when it comes to spices. It may like too much, like anything over like 160 on the Scoville or whatever it's called will make me hiccup, and that would not be good for this podcast. So I can handle, I would say for like the medium like somebody who's like medium salsa is pretty spicy. That's me. I can handle a quarter of teaspoon of cayenne, and that's a very good therapeutic dose in general, but it's a really good one for stopping the bleeding. So we also know that because of those things, it's a cardiotonic. So it's a circulatory stimulant and a cardiotonic. And this is something that, when people get to a certain age in life, and they go to the doctor for their checkup, they're like, "Oh, everything looks good. It's just you're gonna have to take a baby aspirin for the rest of your life to regulate your blood pressure and thin out your blood." And I think a really good alternative to that, I'm no doctor. I'm not going to tell you what to not take. But I don't, I would say, well, how would you feel about cayenne, a quarter of a teaspoon of cayenne in my water every day? And then we come back in 6 months and check my vitals then. How would you feel about that, doc? Hey, that would be the conversation I would have. And I personally enjoy drinking cayenne in my water every morning. At least I have been in the past this amount of time. Certainly, as the seasons change and things become different, I might change my mind about that. But it's really seems to be vibing right now. So perfect time for the herb of the week. Cayenne pepper is decongestive. It's a decongestant. And how do you know? Well, if you smell it, it kind of makes you. It has a stimulating expectorant quality too. Like it will make you cough. Like, you ever smelled cayenne just like cooking, or like if you like opened up the pot or a lid of something? And for me, I make fire cider and I put a little cayenne in it. And every time I open up the lid when I'm cooking it, like when it's setting out, and I check it, I'm like, oh, woo. Yeah, it just like you can't help it. It just like stimulates the expectoration. But as far as a decongestant, think about those Aries areas that I was telling you again, from the maxillary arch up to the crown of the head. So if you get congestion in those areas, that's the sinuses, cayenne, and by congestion, I mean like damp, stagnation, like I'm talking like the springtime kapha, mud in the face kind of feeling. Cayenne pepper is a great way to dry that out. So how would I recommend that? I really like just cayenne in my food. I'll get to the applications later, but it's a good decongestant, a drier outer of the sinuses and of the lungs. Here's a fun story. So when my good friend Andrew Harris and he's got an incense company called Higher Power Aromatics. And we have a club that we get together and we just roll incense and we hang out. We're always sharing new incense ingredients. It's called the Frag Heads, like fragrance, Frag Heads. And it's really fun club. And one time, we get this charcoal and we have a censer and we're like, hey, check this out. I got this cool like aloes wood from, Indonesia. And they're like, wow, that's cool. And, we got this frankincense from Somalia. Oh man, that's amazing. And just really nerding out about aromatic plants. And I was like, hey, what about this? What if we put like a tiny, tiny, tiny pinch of cayenne pepper? Because smell it. Like, it's like aromatic. And we smell it. Yeah, it smells good. I wonder what that smells like in an incense. And so just a tiny pinch on a charcoal. And immediately, within like a half of a second, we were just like, and like had to like get up and leave the room. We're like scrambling and our eyes are burning. And so if you were like really in need of a stimulating decongestant and you're feeling like the Aries, that's like, so one of the sign of the Aries too is like, I dare you. And the Aries is like, done, I'll do it. So that's an Aries dare for you Aries out there. You know what? I called it prankincense. Oh man, that was brutal. I will not do that again. It was like we sprayed pepper spray in the room. And just, have you ever done that before? I've done that before too when I was a teenager, just to see. And it was in my grandpa's house too, so we got in trouble big time. Because he was like, he had it, and we're like, oh, let's just see what this is like. and cousins, dares, of course. All right, some additional medicinal virtues of cayenne. The Capodano capsicum annuum. It's an anodyne. That means it's a pain reliever. I love it for headaches. It is, to me, a great hangover cure. So I don't get hangovers anymore, but I know people that do, and when they do, I'm always like, hey, you should drink a little bit of cayenne water or have a little bit of my fire cider because it'll zip you right up. It really does. It thins out the blood. It relaxes the tissues. It's very stimulating, and it's very relaxing for pain. It's good for tense muscles, and I like it to use it topically for this as well. And I'll get to some other applications here in a second. I have notes at this part, so I'm gonna follow my notes because otherwise I'm just gonna derail myself. It's great for neuropathy. It really is, especially like diabetic neuropathy in the feet, and having a poultice of cayenne pepper. I also learned this from Barbara O'Neill, where you can take a paper towel, and this is how it's funny. She demonstrates this. She always gets like a cutting board, and then she puts a piece of saran wrap down on top of the cutting board, and then she gets a paper towel, folds it in half, puts some olive oil on the paper towel, puts about a teaspoon of cayenne pepper, or cayenne pepper, as she calls it, that helps keep the wallabies out of her garden. And she puts the teaspoon of cayenne pepper on the paper towel that's covered in olive oil, and the olive oil is there to help draw it into the body, but also to keep it onto the towel. And then you just simply put your foot on top of that, and then you wrap up the saran wrap over the top of that, and then you put your sock on, and you go to sleep. And if you have normal feeling in your toes, a few hours later into the night, you'll wake up and feel like, ooh, that's really pins and needle stimulating. The feeling of pins and needles is the feeling of the blood returning and waking up the system again. But if you have diabetic neuropathy, one of the things that can be most dangerous to the tissues for diabetic neuropathy, or neuropathy in general, is by putting cold tissues into hot water. So you can warm them up again with cayenne pepper very safely and restore the flow of that font from the center outwards to the periphery and back again, and dispel the disease-causing coldness. I've used this also for neuropathy associated with like shingles and like really painful, herpetic lesions, I guess, where the nerves it seems to be like exposed inside of this boil. Cayenne pepper is exceptional there as well, topically. And again, for trauma. And one of the great things about cayenne pepper in the case of trauma and tense muscles and stuff is that it's moving blood in and moving blood out. So let's just say like after a surgery, after falling, a place where bruising is prone or stagnation, again, there's that element of cold. And we're talking about moving that cankerous cold out. And so you could put some cayenne pepper, which is going to stimulate the movement of the blood. It's going to dilate the blood vessels. It's going to open up all of these ancillary channels so that anything that's stagnating can move out, and anything that is not participating in the healing process can move in. And it's wonderful. It's wonderful for pain. I love it. And I really just, if somebody's just feeling sore in general, I really like just recommending a little bit of cayenne pepper. It's a diaphoretic, so that means it supports a fever, and that goes back to Thompson's philosophy, and how basically the fever is the archetypical disease, but it's also the archetypical cure. And so working through the process of diaphoresis, working through the process of ventilating the body and allowing that fever to move as is intelligently and inherently designed to do without causing too much stress to the organism. Of course, one of the things that I feel like is the only danger in fever, there's two actually. One is of dehydration. So whenever a fever starts, just just put like memos all over the place, like sticky pads, like drink water, drink something. Get that water, that structured water, back into your body so that it can move, and continue to move whatever it wants to move out, so that you can replenish your sweat, whatever's all that water that's coming out. The other danger of a fever is, in my mind, the most dangerous thing is suppressing it. That's my opinion. What do I know? Maybe now's a good time to give a little disclaimer that this is educational purposes. It's information. It's not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure illness. I'm just a presenter, a community herbalist. It's my role to provide supporting information. You can make an informed decision on your own health. That said, and I'm glad I said it now. So Cayenne is a great one for stimulating that diaphoretic action. So if I'm I have the type of constitution that is kind of cold and kind of dry. So when I work with Cayenne, I got to make sure I am hydrating in other ways. I got to keep my sea moss levels up. I got to keep my marshmallow levels up. I got to keep my water up. And when I'm feeling a little under the weather, my constitution, as kind of a colder constitution, it's more difficult for me to generate like a nice hot fever. I need a little jump start there in that department. So I really like Cayenne as a stimulating diaphoretic. Other people who have a really hot constitution, think about your Aries archetypical Aries person, or fire sign person, ruddy face, prone to outburst, and sharp-witted, that's sharp gaze, transformative, always hungry, always hangry. Give me a sandwich. They might be a little bit ill from the too much use of Cayenne. All right, so there's other diaphoretics that might come in handy for them too. I like it though also as a diaphoretic in the bathtub. So this is another thing. It's like the dose is really, really critical here, because if I put I could put a quarter of a teaspoon of cayenne pepper in my water and drink it. But if I put like a half of a teaspoon in my bathtub, it makes me tingle like the Dickens, I guess. I don't know. It makes me tingly. It makes me really uncomfortable. And that's because there's so much blood moving to the surface of my body. And that is really important to me in my Thompsonian view of vitalism, especially for the kind of constitution that I have. But I don't recommend that for everyone, because I also am very considerate of individual constitutions and unique things like that. So think about that a little bit, though. If you have a cold constitution, you have a really hard time, feeling warm, and you could try experimenting with just a little pinch of cayenne in your bathtub next time. I'm talking really, measure it out. I'm talking about a pinch, okay? It is great for a sore throat. Okay, so here's a story. There was a musician that came into my shop one time. She was a professional, I was going to say professional Leo. She was definitely a Leo. I could tell. She was just very, very extravagant and, big hair and everything like that. And, but she was a professional vocalist. And she came in and she asked me about something for her voice, her tired voice. And at the time I recommended like a tincture of cayenne, and I don't know why. I can't remember why. And I said something like 5 drops or something. And then, I don't know, 6 months later, she came back in and she was like, I got to get that stuff that you recommended or that you made me for my voice. It was amazing. And I was like, oh, really cool. What did I recommend? And I was thinking to myself, like marshmallow or like calamus or something that I, normally work with. And she's like, Cayenne. And I thought to myself, like, Cayenne? I didn't recommend that for your voice. Why would I do that? I've never thought of that. She's like, no. And she was singing the praises so much about, and it was probably one of these things that like I read that day, and then somebody came in, because this happens all the time, like those synchronicities. It happens every day. And I was like, oh, I'll try it. And this is perfect. But anyway, she was like, it worked so amazing. It was so good. Like I had lost my voice and I had this big show and blah, blah, blah. And I'm on tour and all this stuff. And it just brought it back. And so I thought about it as like a cautionary thing. Like, it's really going to restore a lot of the blood to the voice for sure. But if your voice is out, you should probably also like listen to the signs of your body and, maybe take a night off. I know it's not easy to say to professional, like, hey, stop working or whatever, but these are the signs of our body. So that comes with this caveat. But so anyway, she's in the business and she knows all these people. And now I have like these professional vocalists, like big shot, like touring musicians and people on Broadway and stuff like that. And they're calling me and asking me to mail out the secret voice stuff. And it's like, it's made word in the music industry, which is really funny to me because I used to, I'm a musician. I have a history of being in music too. And I know that like the professional musicians, I was just underground, like garage musician, but the professional musicians are very, very difficult to please. And so the fact that like it's just a simple tincture. It's not like a formula. It's just brandy and cayenne, 1 to 4, 40%, is like this magical potion. And of course it's like, I'm not going to undersell my intention and all of the other little magical things that I use when I make my single potions. Of course, I know that I make them with a lot of that, but I just think it's really cool. And I think it's really fun to send out cayenne tincture and, 5 drops in water to like some pretty big shots. That's really fun. So I learned that from this particular customer, which is really fun. And I love it. It's actually my favorite thing for my sore throats. So when I get a sore throat and like my throat is, I'm also myself personally, I'm really prone to like, I wouldn't say strep, but like I would say the symptoms that people call strep, like just like inflammation in the throat. And when that occurs, the very first sign it occurs, I just start gargling. That's probably what this woman was talking about after all, and not like losing her voice, but like her throat was sore. But I just will put a little bit of cayenne in the water and it'll be hot water in this case. And sometimes I'll put some salt in there too, and I'll just gargle it and I'll try and gargle it. And I do this thing too when I gargle with cayenne and salt. I do a range and I try to find, and I don't like go here. I'm going to demonstrate. And I try to find like, where's the note that like wants to be stuck on? Like, okay, it's right there. It's like right in the pocket of those tissues. I'm like, trying to hang on to that for like, 60 seconds. And then there's something else that is more than just the gargling and the topical application of the cayenne. When you're humming and you're vibrating your voice and you're moving your lymphatic system in that area because of the vibrations, and you're giving some signals to your vagus nerve, and you're putting yourself out of a state of fear and into a fun little playful mindset about healing. There's just all these little tricks that I think that are so important when it comes to therapeutic strategies that are beyond the simple tincture itself, you know what I'm saying? So that's fun. Metabolic function I have here as a thing. So yes, stimulate. It's definitely a stimulating aromatic, and it will. I think it has a profound effect on stimulating the appetite, improving the uh, absorption, elimination, and assimilation of unwanted things by process. I mean, by the fact that it's stimulating the body in general. Um, here's a quote. Here's another quote from the Bible. This is also from the Torah, where I have this written down. Um, the life of the flesh is in the blood. The life of the flesh is in the blood. That's in Leviticus. So when you are stimulating the blood, in the case of working with cayenne, you are stimulating the life of the flesh. Okay, and um, cayenne is a great remedy for ulcers. Oh, what ulcers? What? I thought if I put it in my I thought it was really hard on your stomach. Well, there's some caution if you're like sensitive to Solanaceae, nightshade family plants, but because cayenne, oh, I forgot to mention in the bleeding stop stuff, it also not only does it um, uh, take away excess pressure on the particular area by stimulating the blood flow to move all throughout the body, but the capsicum compound in there is also something that helps stop bleeding. So where there's going to be pooling of blood, or where there's going to be leaking of blood, whether it's out of your finger, or whether it's around your heart, or whether it's in a particular artery in your brain, or whether it's in your alimentary canal as an ulceration, it's going to stimulate the healing of that by reducing the burden of the blood pooling in that area, but also stopping the blood. So I have used cayenne for ulcer type lesions in acute situations. Okay, so I don't necessarily love it for long-term chronic type stuff. But if something comes up like that, I think it's a really good way of hitting it right away. I always couple that with demulcent plants, and I like to use astringent plants as well. And then the therapeutic strategy would be to go back and figure out what's going on. Why is that there? But as a let's say ulcer first aid, okay. So my favorite ways to work with cayenne are in food, and that's pretty simple, chili, crawfish, just put a little bit of cayenne pepper in your eggs. It's easy. That's it, let thy food be thy medicine. Some famous country's herb daddy said that. It was Greece's herb daddy, wasn't it? It was Greece's herb daddy. It was Hippocrates, the herb daddy of Greece. I love, just cayenne powder and water. That's one of my very favorite ways to work with cayenne pepper. Oh, you know what? I forgot to mention. I like cayenne medicinal application or virtue of cayenne for like the cessation of smoking tobacco. It works really well with lobelia and with the nervine. So I don't know if this is a common formula, but this is my formula, and it's like 9 parts milky oats. And I mean like the milky oats extract. I'm not talking about like a tincture of like dried oats. I mean like the milky oats. It's got the sediment and it's really, milky. And like 1 part lobelia and 1 part cayenne. That's my smoking cessation, and it's awesome because the milky oats is going to help with the nervous system aspect. And why is somebody smoking? Because there's something about the nervous system that needs to be healed, or that the smoking can address, actually can be therapeutic too. And so taking away smoking isn't always the best idea unless you have a strategy for implementing the nervous system. I digress. Cayenne is really, really, really helpful in that case too. So if somebody is trying to quit smoking, a little cayenne powder, again, 1/4 teaspoon up to 1/2 teaspoon, in some water as you drink water throughout the day, if you just have it ready so that way every time you're having a Nick fit or something like that, you could just drink a little bit of this cayenne water. But I just like drinking cayenne water in the morning. It really gets me fired up. It gets me going. I drank cayenne water before I talk to you right now. I drink cayenne water before I take a sauna or a bath, where someplace that I want to move that sweat as a strategy too. I'm going to drink cayenne water if I have a sore throat. I'm going to drink cayenne water if I have a stuffy sinuses, things like that. And so that's one of my favorite ways to work with cayenne. As a topical, infused oil or salve is fantastic for the bruising, for the pain, for the sore muscles, for traumatic injury. Make it so that the oil is red. Like, don't skimp. Don't just put like a couple teaspoons of cayenne into a jar and fill it up with olive oil. I mean, like, I'm talking like a cup of cayenne and then 8 to 16 ounces or whatever of oil. I want to see red salve. That's what I'm looking for when I'm looking for a good infused oil. I want to see the color of the plant. I like to make my infused oils at a ratio of 1 part plant matter by weight to 5 to 6 parts oil by volume. So I make a really strong, super kick-ass infused oils, and they work, and no one complains, except that they stain. So yes, they stain. Sorry, they stain. Sorry for healing your bruise and making it feel better. I know it got your white socks stained. So this is just let your people know as you give them the medicine, as you're putting it in their hand, that you carefully craft it and that you're very attentive to all these things. And that, see, my wife, she recommends to me when I settled down and I was rowdy and I wore the same clothes, out in the field that I did to bed. She's like, no, that's not going to work. You're going to need, clothes for this and clothes for that. Okay, cool. And now I have a pair of oil clothes. And these are my clothes that I wear when I am covered with oil. And I have a pair of oil socks. And I have an oil shirt. And I have an oil pillowcase. And these are just little strategies that if you're working with somebody that has the need of oiling themselves for whatever reason, offer those little tidbits too. They'll appreciate it. And so will the laundry person in their life. I like it as a tincture. I already mentioned that I usually just make a cayenne pepper powder tincture. I like to percolate it. I like to add some cayenne from the garden or cayenne from the farmer's market as a fresh tincture. And I just like to, cayenne is one that a lot of the other ones I make, like I know specifically, there's this much wood betony, there's this much alcohol, there's this much motherwort, there's this much alcohol. The motherwort is fresh, the wood betony is dry, things like that. I know these things. When it comes to my cayenne, I feel very folky about it. It's putting me like in touch with the ghost of Sam Thompson. And I'm like, I'll use a little fresh, I'll use a little dry, I'll make a maceration, I'll make a percolation, I'll put them together. I don't care. Because the dose to me is not about I'm not going to, like, a therapeutic dose is like according to hotness, like how much can I handle? So, I can only handle 2 drops before I start coughing. Okay, that's it. It's 1 drop then. Something like that. So yeah, a tincture of cayenne, my tincture of cayenne is very strong. So you can make it however you like though. Make sure it's red. Well, it's like reddish brown when it becomes a tincture. And I guess it depends on the color. It depends on the alcohol that you use. Never mind. Just make sure that it's strong and spicy so that you know. Like I said, I like it in a bath. I like it as a decoration. I think it looks really cool when people string up a bunch of cayenne and, like you can do it like flag style where it's like looping, like, like you're hanging like little flags. Or when I've never done this way before, but it's like all together in this like hanging kind of like cocoon of cayenne peppers. That looks awesome. I think that's the type of thing that also there's a medicinal virtue to what we surround ourselves with. And I think that needs to be highlighted and emphasized as well. It's beautiful. It's waxy. It's red. It looks like the salsa dancing emoji lady. It's just like sexy, and it makes you want to like come closer to it and like, whoa, cool. It also makes you want to stay away. It's like it's like fire. It's like the element of fire, where it's like, wow, what is that? Is it hot? Ooh, I burned myself, but I want to look. And let's see, cayenne cautions, real quick. If you're cutting cayenne, it could be. I know Dr. Christopher's like, oh, put it in your eye, but I'm like, you might want to watch out for the sensitive areas of your body if you're working with cayenne tincture, cayenne salve, any of this stuff. I don't know. I could probably tell you a story about cutting up cayenne to put in my fire cider and then going to the bathroom. You get the picture. So that does it. It wraps up our first installment of the Herb of the Week. It's cayenne pepper, coming in at a whopping hour and a half. This is the open to the public episode, but if you found this valuable, please join us at rootradicle.teachable.com and find our year-long Herb of the Week course, dropping once a week, and many other courses as well. Members of Herb of the Week get 23% off the relevant Herb of the Week products. So if you go to tippecanoeherbs.com, you could find 23% off cayenne tincture, 23% off our Joints Joy salve, which is awesome, one of the best things we make, fire cider, which we call flame cider, cayenne pepper bulk. Maybe I'll even put it in our Aries incense blend, which doesn't have cayenne in it, I promise. It's really good. It's got dragon's blood. It's really nice. And it's made with little spears, so it's like very Martian. It's got cinnamon, dragon's blood, propolis. Anyway, if you think that's, you need to use a promo code, and the promo code is taking a pep. That's right, taking a pep. And this is a reference to Little Caesars Pizza. If you ever go to Little Caesars and order a pepperoni pizza, heaven forbid, the person up front will yell to the back, taking a pep. And it's funny because if you go to Italy and order a pepperoni pizza, they're going to put a spicy pepper on your pizza. That's what a pepperoni is. We call what's called salame picante pepperoni. So if you want a pepperoni pizza in Italy, make sure you order salame picante, unless you really want a pepper on your pizza. So taking a pep. If you found all of this worth $1 a week, then that would be great to see you in the Herb of the Week class. Join us for, we have an online foundations herb class that also starts in April, but it's not too late, hopefully, for you to join. It's a 7 months program. It's an interactive program. I send you a lot of stuff in the mail so that you can learn how to make your own medicine. And we do a foundational approach to herbalism as well, a vitalist foundational herbalist program. I have in-person classes, an in-person 7-month program too. That fills up every year, the year before. So if you're in Milwaukee and you're interested in studying, or Southeast Wisconsin, you're interested in studying in person, let me know ASAP. We have herb walks that I do many, many times a year. Those are really fun. I have a lot of in-shop medicine making seminars. I like to do things in person. I've always been an in-person, smaller, focused on our community. So here I am expanding out into the World Wide Web, if you will. So if you find this valuable and you want to spend $1, we also have a Telegram group that's really fun. You could share your recipes and your ideas and the things that you're doing to connect with your Herb of the Week in that way. So it's the astrological season of Aries, initiating the Herb of the Week of cayenne pepper. And Kyle Denton from Tippecanoe Herbs and Root Radicle bidding you a merry spring and happy new year. Capodanno. Ciao for now.
1, 2. 1, 2, 3. Cayenne. You bring out the sweats in me, and when I count to 1, 2, 3, I count you as a friend. Cayenne.